Hi everybody, can you hear me out there?
Yes, sir.
I'm Tom Wolf, and I work for you. And I'm really happy to be here to talk about something that I think is really important to all of us, and that is financial fraud and abuse, especially targeted to seniors. But before I start, let me just, if I could, just say a few things. First of all, where's Maureen? Okay, Maureen, thank you for opening this place up for us to have this meeting. And I got to say, I was going around the room just saying hi to folks, and they were, unless maybe you're paying them, they're saying such nice things about this center and you. So thank you very much. And I also want to point out, Erin, where is Erin? Erin, yeah. This is Erin's. She is the Southwest Director for me for the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. She works out of Pittsburgh. Today is her birthday. So I want this to be a chance for you to ask questions, but I have the Secretary of Aging, Teresa Osborne, Secretary of Banking and Securities, Robin Weissman here, and they just want to say a few things, and then we're going to get to your questions as quickly as possible. So again, thank you for being here. This is a great turnout, and let's see what we can do together to address and overcome the scourge of financial fraud and abuse targeted especially to seniors. So Teresa, you want to go first?
Good afternoon, everyone. Governor, thank you so much for the opportunity to join you and Secretary Weissman here today. But as I look out and see all of the faces so kindly and intently looking at us, I just want to thank you for being a part of your community, for coming to this senior center. Here within a mall is pretty incredible. So for your community to work together in order to make this possible, it warms my heart. Also to Linda Hall and her staff at the Beaver County Area Agency on Aging for all they do every day. And I did have a chance to meet two of her protective service investigators, two fine women who are committed to ensuring that every day they are responding to reports of need for protective services, which at the end of that report means a person, one of your peers in your community here in Beaver County who is alleged to be the victim of abuse, neglect, exploitation, abandonment. And we sit here in the month of June, and 2 days from now, on June 15th, is recognized as World Elder Abuse Awareness Day. A day that I wish, as I'm sure all of you wish, that we didn't even have to pause and recognize. Across the globe, think about that, across the globe, not just here in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, that over nearly 3 million individuals are age 60 and over. But we pause on Thursday to recognize that across the globe, this public crisis, this health crisis, this extreme issue of abuse, and in particular financial exploitation of our seniors, that we and the Wolf administration will not condone, we will not accept, and we will ensure that we continue every day with Beaver County, as well as the other 66 counties of our Commonwealth, that we have the resources in place in order to respond to those reports of need for protective services. I also want to thank the work of your county commissioners who are here with us today as well. I hail from Lackawanna County, not too far from here, but I started 27 years ago as a protective service investigator. Every day in our Area Agency on Aging, responding to and investigating cases of elder abuse. Working in county government, I know the support that it takes of county commissioners in order to ensure that we can do what we need to do every day to protect our seniors. And to your district attorney, who's also here with us today, the work of law enforcement, the work of prosecutors, the work of the protective service investigators in your local Area Agency on Aging is critically important. And then for us to communicate with you about how to stop abuse, how to report it, how to not be afraid if you yourself or one of your friends or family members or one of your peers here at this senior center somehow tells you that they think something's wrong and their bank account or someone's threatening them with financial exploitation or using their money for themselves, that's not right. So we need to be the eyes and ears. You need to be the eyes and ears also for each other and not be afraid to pick up that phone and call your DA or call your Area Agency on Aging. Tell someone that you trust that you think something is wrong in either your own particular life situation or for one of your friends, family members, or one of your peers here at the Senior Center. So we desire very much to continue our collaboration, to continue this dialogue beyond today. While it's a privilege for us to be here in Beaver County, when we leave and travel to other counties to share this message, you're here. You're here in your communities, living and striving to age well and age in place with dignity and respect, and we are committed to helping you do that. So we look forward to answering your questions. Now that you know my face, you can call me anytime. It's easier when you're connecting with somebody who perhaps you've met in person. So don't hesitate to call, to reach out for yourselves or for someone else in order to stop elder abuse right in its tracks, because that is not acceptable. We won't condone it, and we want to work with you in order to prevent it. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me? Everyone can hear me? I want to tell you that it's always a privilege working with this governor. He has enormously improved the lives of Pennsylvanians, and it's always a privilege and an honor for me to not just serve him, but certainly to attend an event like today. I do want to tell you that I'm the Secretary of Banking and Securities, which means I regulate the industry, banks, securities firms, and a lot of the other financial services that you receive. But I do want to tell you that one of the first priorities of this governor was to establish the Consumer Financial Protection Initiative for all Pennsylvanians. And the goal of that is to communicate properly. We have an interagency information exchange now who are talking to each other all of the time about financial services and issues and challenges. So when you call 1-800-PA-BANKS, which is our number, you will be able to speak to a live person, and if we can't answer your question, we can send you to a department that can. The second part of the governor's Consumer Financial Protection Initiative was to protect citizens from scams. And our department is doing an enormous amount of work on this, both in responding to scams or financial threats, as well as by educating and doing outreach such as today. We are happy to do outreach, in particular as it relates to seniors, at any point in time. And one of the most fundamental tenets of the governor's Consumer Financial Protection Initiative is to protect senior citizens. Why do we need to protect senior citizens? Particularly because in addition to cybersecurity threats today, financial abuse and exploitation of seniors is one of the most significant financial crimes of our century. There's a reason for that. So many of us are now becoming senior citizens. More than 12,000 baby boomers turn 62 every day. And the fact of the matter is, seniors have the money. You've accumulated money over a period of time. You typically have a steady stream of income through Social Security. So you're a logical target for scammers and people who want to either exploit you, which is what happens when a family member is exploiting a senior for the financial resources, or to defraud you, which is what we call what third parties do in terms of taking care and absconding with your money. So it's very significant. It's a very significant crime today, and it's growing exponentially, much of it over the internet or by phone. More than 5 million seniors are scammed every year, and it exceeds, in the most recent year, it exceeded $37 billion. So this is not a small, petty crime. This is very significant, and it's why the governor has made it a top priority for all Pennsylvanians, but particularly for those of us who are getting older, those of you who have financial resources, and who are considered easy prey. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, now let's open it up to questions. Who would like to go first? No questions? Come on.
While you're thinking...
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Sir, I'm a concern. I'm 72 years old. Me and my wife worked for 5 bankrupt American companies, all big ones. The last one I had was General Motors, 1/3 size it used to be. My question is, this state, and even the United States, is broke. We're billions of dollars. The United States is trillions in debt. Pennsylvania is billions in debt. I have school teachers making $100,000 a year and retired on $100,000 a year, and the money isn't there to pay them. And what are we going to do about this?
Okay. First of all, did you see the news? Yesterday I signed a historic pension reform bill that actually does something about this.
Correct, but 1920, we're living now. We're broke.
No, I'd argue that. I think it was a pretty big deal what we did to move forward. Now, what you're talking about is the bill that was left unpaid. I think it was Senator Corman said this yesterday at the press conference. We inherited. I mean, I've been in public life now for just a little over 2 years. Well, a little less than 2.5 years. And most of the people who are now in the General Assembly actually came here after this problem was in place. One of the problems that led to that debt, obviously 2008, but one of the problems was that the Commonwealth didn't pay its bill for many years. And starting in 2010, they put down a plan that we would pay those bills, and I have been, and the General Assembly, we've been paying those bills ever since. What we had to do on the other side was change the design of the plan so that the taxpayers, all of you, me, weren't at risk for things that are beyond our control, the economy, interest rate environment, mortality rates, life expectancy. And so what we did yesterday actually is a big step forward. Now, you're right. There was a period of time, a long period of time, when my predecessors decided, for whatever reason, that they weren't going to pay their bills. And so we do have a plan that has a lot of unfunded liabilities, and we need to pay that. And if you look at the estimates, it's going to take us, at the current rate, 20 years to pay that off. Now, I would love to be governor of Pennsylvania in 2036. I don't think I will be. Actually, the Constitution says I won't be. But there's going to be a real drop. So you are right, absolutely right, to complain that my predecessors and the predecessors of the folks in the General Assembly left us a real mess. All of us, and I got to say we worked across the party divide, all of us are trying to clean up that mess. And I think, and I'm saying this from a bipartisan fashion because these are Republicans and Democrats who worked together on this, I think we did a pretty good job. Now, having said that, you're right to stand up and lament the fact that anybody had to make the decisions we made because we were left a mess. You were left a mess. All of us were left a mess. We're trying our best to clean that up. And I think what happened yesterday was a big, good, significant step in the right direction. Is there more work to do? I think you're right. And all you have to do is look at that unfunded liability. On the deficit with the budget, I think I also inherited a problem there. And if you look at the budget that I presented back in February, I'm trying to do in a very responsible way. I didn't call for any increase in sales tax or the income tax. I am streamlining government. And Teresa's department is one of the departments. We're trying to make things work better with what we have. And I did that in my business, and I'm doing that for government. And I think that's really the responsible way to do it. So I think you're right to stand up and point out, and maybe even be skeptical. All you politicians, for years we've been fed this nonsense, and what we have is a bankrupt country and a bankrupt state. I'm actually trying to do something about it, and I think over the last 2.5 years I've earned some right to claim that I'm making progress. So that'd be my argument.
I appreciate your efforts, but that hole is awful.
You're right. No doubt about it. Okay. Any nice questions? Yes, ma'am.
I'm not sure if it's nice,
Oh,
but
come
I
on.
do have a question.
Okay.
Regarding your proposal to combine multiple departments,
Right.
including the Department of Aging, under one umbrella, I'd like to know, number one, is it a done deal? And number two, how do you intend to protect the rights and needs of senior citizens who are very concerned about getting lost in the process?
Okay, that's a great question. Here the question, it was what about the consolidation of the 4 agencies, including the Department of Aging, Secretary Osborne's agency? How can we be assured that that's going to not only, you were nice to say, not going to take away the rights and services that we now provide for senior citizens, but my goal is not just to keep them and protect them, it's to make them better, to do a better job. So here's my thought on this. First of all, in the past, when you have a budget deficit, the first thing people do is either say, okay, I'm going to raise your taxes, or I'm going to slash and burn. I'm just going to cut right across the board. And when you cut, in the state government, you're cutting human services, like the services for senior citizens, or education. And I said, how about a different thing here? What if we try something different? I'm going to try to make government work smarter and more efficiently. And ironically, this is something that people have talked about for a long time. I have not found any evidence that it's actually been done at the state level, anywhere in the United States. So I'm not trying to just hold on to things or slash a little bit. I'm trying to actually make things work better. And one of the things that I think we all learned from, we're addressing another crisis in Pennsylvania, the opioid epidemic that's affecting so many people. But if you look at how we did that, and that again was a bipartisan effort, and I think Pennsylvania has now become one of the leaders in the country in terms of addressing that issue and getting out and talking about it and actually putting resources behind it. That was actually an effort in my administration of the Department of Aging, of the Department of Health, of the Department of Drug and Alcohol Programs, of the Department of Human Services. And they all work together. I mean, if you look at some of the things that came out of that, it came out of each one of those 4 agencies. And I think to the extent it's working and is starting to be effective, and we're really just starting it this year, is because we dropped the silos and work together. Now think of it, when you call in to the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, you have a problem. I don't care what the problem is. If you don't call in to the agency that actually corresponds to your specific problem, what has happened in the past? Well, you get somebody who's been trained in that particular silo. Maybe it's the Department of Aging. But your issue really doesn't fit in that silo. It fits somewhere else. Well, the way it's been is they've been trained in that silo really well, so they can answer any question you want to know about in terms of seniors. But if you have a question that doesn't quite fit into that silo, then you're in trouble because they don't know where to send you. This is an attempt to get to a point where when you call, we're not asking you to conform to the accidents of history. I mean, I don't know, when was it, 20 years ago, we got a Department of Aging, and 40 years ago we got a Department of Human Services. I have looked throughout the Bible, my Bible, and I've not found any evidence that God ordained that we should have these 4 silos. And I haven't found anybody that says when you call in to state government with a problem, that we ought to make you conform to the way the accident of history is. That we need to conform to you. And if you have a problem, you don't have an aging problem or a health problem or a human service problem or a drug and alcohol problem. You have your problem. And I'm trying to make government work better so that when you call it. Now, you were right to be skeptical because we haven't done it that way. In human beings, we all dislike change. And this is change. But I'm hoping, and I'll let Secretary Osborne talk about it because she's in the center of this. When this is all done, and we are moving forward, we need legislation, but it's moving forward. I actually have named a secretary of the new Health and Human Services Department. I hope what you see is that folks with problems that the Department of Aging has dealt with in the past, you're going to get better service. Teresa.
Thanks, Governor. I too appreciate I appreciate the question very much. Now, 2.5 years ago, when I was sitting home in Scranton and received a call from then Governor-elect Wolf, did I think that I would be here this, 13th day of June 2017 talking about unification and the creation of a new Pennsylvania Department of Health and Human Services? No. However, I landed in Harrisburg thinking, all right, we can make some positive change, but it was incredibly difficult. As the State Unit on Aging and you work in these bureaucratic silos that we created, how are we actually going to break them down? And as a former Human Services Administrator, when my county of Lackawanna, I was Human Services Administrator and Area Agency and Aging Director. As Human Services for Health and Human Services, you get the best of every world. for the public health, the social services, the behavioral services that we need to provide to Pennsylvanians in need, regardless of age or stage of life. Regardless of age or stage of life. And for seniors in particular, I shared with you, I cut my teeth in protective services. It's where I started my career 27 years ago. We can do so much better to serve vulnerable Pennsylvanians in a unified health and human services model with the best leadership possible, with the folks back in state government doing what they do every day, and to utilize those precious resources entrusted to our care. And for the Department of Aging, historically, it's been nearly 80% of our budget from the lottery fund. So hopefully all of you visited right down the hallway here in this mall, the lottery store, and bought your tickets today, because that benefits older Pennsylvanians. That ensures that we do what we can do every day to provide for the health and human services and the protective services for older Pennsylvanians in need. So for me, that excites me in terms of what we can do under the governor's leadership to ensure that we are utilizing our resources entrusted to our care by you as taxpayers and by those kind souls who bought a lottery ticket today to the best of our ability. And in a unified model where we are creating actual positive change, reducing fragmentation, reducing duplication. And I know everyone out there can sit there and say, oh, she's got the talking points down, that's great verbiage, but what does that mean? If we fail to put this plan into action effectively, that's a human life. And that's a pretty precious commodity to myself and my fellow colleagues, my cabinet colleagues who are working on this, and to every state employee who has been investing time and attention since February 7th when the governor publicly made his budget announcement to get us to the end of June when the General Assembly will vote on this. So to get it right is what I want to be a part of. I don't want to be, as the governor referenced, the year 2036 a little bit from now. I'm a Pennsylvanian forever, I hope. I don't want to sit back and say, boy, that crashed and burned. This is an opportunity for us to reinvent government, to realign how we're helping Pennsylvanians in need. And with nearly 13 million Pennsylvanians, this administration is committed to ensuring that you have access to public health, to social and to human services when you need them. Not because you're stuck on a phone, not getting access to the services that you need, either at the state level or in your local communities. Because this is an effort that has to depend on our collaboration with the counties and with all of the underpinnings of health and human services within it. So we're excited about the opportunity, and every commitment is there from the governor's lips to your ears during the last couple of months in terms of protecting lottery funds to benefit older Pennsylvanians. That still is #1 priority.
I used to be Secretary of Revenue, by the way, lotteries in the Department of Revenue. Yes.
Question.
Oh. Yeah.
First of all, I want to thank you, Governor, for coming to business today. But I'm a pastor, and I deal a lot with the elderly. And one of the great things that you might want to know today, we hear all the time, is healthcare, healthcare. What I've seen about these senior centers, this does more to help individuals in healthcare than prescription drugs and hospitals. This gives our seniors a place to come, to make friends, to be active in life. And I feel that these centers are overlooked as something that's just convenient. But I see them as something that's necessary for our senior citizens. The precious people here that volunteer their time, that make this all work, they do it out of love. And different states have different problems, but every state has senior citizens.
Yeah.
I would like to see Pennsylvania be a model state for the caring of its senior patrons. Here, here.
Yeah. Let me just repeat the question. Actually, that's a really good comment. What's your name again? Pastor David. Pastor David. Pastor David just made a really important point that these senior centers really do, and I don't know, it's a good question whether other states do exactly this, but I was on the board of our local senior center in York County, in my town, and I know how important this is. And I'm not sure that anybody has done statistics as to what it means for the health, the life expectancy, just the overall life satisfaction of folks who take part in these programs. But I have to believe that here, as in my place in York County, it made lives better. It's an enrichment. So and this gets back to the last question. What I'm trying to do is, I recognize that we have financial constraints. That's great, but we have to deliver services that make lives better, and this is one of them. Seniors need to, and I'll be 69 this year. We need options. We need to make sure that we have choices as we age, and everybody ages differently, and everybody's life choices are different. What you want to do, we need to enable choices, and I think, as you point out, this is one of those things that is really precious. So I'm trying to live within our means, and when I say streamline government, do it in a way so that we can actually devote more effort to this kind of thing. We can devote more effort to educating our fellow citizens. We can devote more effort to the opioid crisis, and we can devote more effort to job creation. I mean, I was just over at the Shell plant. There are a lot of things happening in this area, and we need to make sure that we keep doing that. I was on a radio program a couple weeks ago, and someone was talking about the health care and the concerns that this is just, you know, talk coming out of Washington. I'm concerned. You know, by 2026, we could have as many as 23 million people off health insurance. As a result of some things I've done, we now have 700,000 people who have health insurance who didn't have it just 2 years ago. So we need to keep moving forward. But one of the questioners said, "Why aren't we just trying to save money?" And I said, the goal of government is just to save money. Well, I didn't realize it. If that's all you want to do, I can save you money. But it'll be a world without senior centers. It'll be a world without schools or roads or a judicial system or police. If that's what you want, I can drive your cost of government to zero. That's not what we want. We want to balance our needs. We have a constraints, and we can't spend a lot. But with what we spend, let's make sure every dollar counts so that we're actually making lives better. And that's what I think we need to discuss and debate. But I agree with you that one of the programs that really works well is this program. And I know you're not related to Maureen, right? You're not just saying that. Okay. Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Speaking of this, again, thank you, Governor and Secretary, for coming today. I work with the Blind Association, and of course, a lot of them are seniors, and I know a lot of their concerns they were voicing is, you're saying that their concern is how are the lottery dollars? What reassurances do we have that the lottery dollars are being protected?
Yeah.
That it's not going to get into this mega department, and laws can be changed. You know, they say it's protected by law, but laws can be changed, and then that money's going to dissipate. Well,
that's true. We have a democracy, so people can change laws. Now, the lottery is not in any one of the departments that's being consolidated. The lottery is actually in the Department of Revenue. But you make a good point. Over time, what has happened, and I think Pennsylvania is the only state in the United States where the lottery is 100% dedicated to older Pennsylvanians, to senior citizens. I don't think that's some places it's education, some places it goes into the general fund. But in Pennsylvania, it's devoted to senior citizens. Now, over the years since it was first put into place, I think in the Schaff administration in the 70s, the lottery has been more successful or less successful. I think the net profit this year will be about $1 billion spent on senior services, including things like this center. But it's also, I think, been true that there have been says, well, this program really is good for seniors. How about if we fund that? And I think there is that problem that could happen. I'm committed to doing what we need to do to protect the lottery funds for seniors. And I'm also committed to trying to make those lottery funds grow. I mean, I can't tell you when I grew up in a church that doesn't even believe in card playing. But when I go by those billboards and see that Powerball has rolled over back to $40 million, it's a bad day for me. And I like when because as the jackpots go up, more and more people buy tickets, and that means more money coming into senior programs. So I will continue to do what I can do to protect the lottery. One of the problems is there have been some raids. I think we're doing some things to actually make sure that the lottery fund continues to be solvent and that it continues to do what it was intended to do in the beginning, and that is help senior citizens. Did I miss anything? Yeah, you might. Okay. You'd think they work for me. Was there somebody? Yes, sir. Oh, yes, ma'am.
Thank you for taking the time to be with us today. My question affects everybody here, and that's gasoline taxes. You probably already know this. I live near the border in Ohio, like I live in Chippewa. So a lot of people go to Ohio to buy their gas because the taxes, on gas are so high, and it's so much higher here in Pennsylvania. And that hurts me because I like to buy local. I like to stay local. And I will pay the extra dollar, to get my gasoline. But all the seniors are on fixed income.
Right.
I know a lot of people that make $8 to $10 an hour, and they need gas to get to work. And it like I said, it kills me that a lot of people say, I'm going to Ohio to buy my gas. Well, that doesn't do us any good. Mm-hmm. So we're losing those people that are near the borders. And I just wondered how else we could bring in income without having the taxes.
That's a good question. Let me answer with two answers here. The first is, and I know I said I've been a politician now for 2.5 years, right? But I'm going to give you a politician answer. It was not my fault. That happened before I became governor. But let me just point out what we've gotten from that, and the reason I think the legislators and the governor at that time signed that bill that uncapped the wholesale price, which allowed the prices to go up so much, was because we also had a problem with the roads and with bridges. And so you have a trade-off there. Let me point out that's one thing. The second thing is, and this is, I'm not justifying this, but it is an interesting point that in Pennsylvania we're sort of unique in that the gas tax is only for highways and bridges. It's only for our Department of Transportation. In other states, they have gas tax, and some of that goes, I don't know, it goes into the general fund, and that all goes to pay for highways and bridges. So some of your tax dollars, your income tax or your sales tax might go for that. In Pennsylvania, there's none of the income tax goes to that, none of the sales tax. So as a result, if you look at that way, our income tax is lower than Ohio's. And if you take out the exemption for food and clothing, I don't know what their sales tax is, but I think we're probably pretty much in line with what they do. So you're right, the gas tax is highest. I guess it's the highest in the country, but I think it's in part because they wanted to, notice how I'm pointing the finger? They, back then, wanted to, and I have to say, I think they made a gutsy decision because we had highways and bridges that were just not adequate, and that was the trade-off. But it's a great question, and I think we need to be cognizant of that it's a real tax on people, not just the tax, but the overall price of fuel for people who need that car and who are on fixed incomes. It's a good question. Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Thank you for coming today, everyone. I have a question just back to the merger. With regards to looking at streamlining at the state level, which I think could work, the one thing that I have questions of is we're looking at the state level to streamline. In the 67 counties across Pennsylvania, there are some unique differences and unique community needs. And I've been a big believer since I started with the Area Agency on Aging 15 years ago that we're not going to get through this financially and emotionally if we don't pull all resources, which is not just government and taxpayer and lottery funded resources, but also community and faith-based resources. And that's unique to the region. And in the past 15 years, in past administrations, I've kind of seen this pull from the local, the region, the county being able to monitor services and knowledge of programs to kind of pull it up to Harrisburg. So the one question I have with the merger plan is what's going to be in place to kind of give back potentially some of the decision-making regionally. And that goes along even with your topic today of fraud, because fraud, Pittsburgh might have something versus Philadelphia versus Potter County. So just wanted to know your thoughts.
Yeah, I'm going to let Secretary Osborne talk about that because she has really good information on it. But I think you're making a good basic point, and that is we have to all make sure that however we organize our government, that we're doing the appropriate things at the appropriate levels. I don't want the noise ordinance in my neighborhood to be set by the federal government. On the other hand, I don't want Social Security to be organized by my local town. with 1,800 people. So we have to figure out what the right level of government to do whatever it is we want to do, and how to mix that. I think that's an internal problem of government. But Secretary Osborne.
Thanks, Governor. I appreciate the question very much, because it's something that we talk about a lot in terms of those that are working so diligently, not just at the state level. I'll answer first from the lens of the Department of Aging as it currently exists today. We have 52 local area agencies on aging that cover the 67 counties of our Commonwealth, including the Beaver County Area Agency on Aging right here. Each area agency on aging, under the Older Americans Act, is required to develop an area plan. That area plan tells you, people in this community, you get to develop that plan in communication with your local leadership, so your local area agency on aging and your local county commissioners. That's critically important when those area plan hearings are held. And one thing that isn't unique about Pennsylvania is often in every county across the Commonwealth when an area plan hearing is held on how dollars are going to be spent in your local area agency on aging, very few people show up. We need your input. That's just one way we can get it, but we need it more regular than that. That communication and collaboration has to continue on a daily basis. We also have, for aging at least, the Pennsylvania Council on Aging that also has regional meetings. So if you're not plugged into those, I'll get you plugged into those. That's where your voices can be heard. Then across the spectrum of human services, for the public health, the human and the social services that we provide, yes, at the state level, and to be certain, we also receive federal funds. We like to keep our federal funders happy, because if we don't, we will run the risk of not getting federal funds. So sometimes some of the rules, so to say, or the regulations aren't even a state rule or regulation that we can change. Sometimes it's a federal rule or regulation that we then need to be advocating together to the folks in Washington as to how a potential rule or regulation is harming Pennsylvania. We see it often in our nursing homes with Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services that have very strict guidelines for how nursing homes need to operate. That for counties that operate county homes, or for other providers of that particular service, which is a very needed service for the most frail of our seniors, sometimes we're a little bit handcuffed. So we need to be communicating and advocating together at a federal level, at a state level, and if you have specifics of what rule or regulation or handcuff perhaps you're seeing in children and youth, or behavioral health ID, or your area agency on aging, your housing programs, your veterans programs, and I can go on and on and on. Anything that touches a life, including transportation, which I know in many rural communities is an issue, and I'm sure Beaver County isn't much different. So those uniquenesses are recognized in many areas of our Commonwealth, especially being such a large Commonwealth with a lot of ruralness to it. So if you have specific thoughts and ideas of where we can work together, inside and outside of the unification opportunity that we have before us, you need to be communicating with us. You can contact me at any time. You can contact my cabinet colleagues at any time. Even if you call the governor's office, I get calls all the time from the governor's office saying, Therese, a constituent just called in and they need help with this. And we will get back to you. It's
called passing the buck. I do a good job of that.
That's why I'm here. So I encourage you, if you have specifics here in Beaver County of what you're worried about in terms of unification inside or outside of it, of how perhaps the state is, however you may feel, is coming down on a particular program or service, got to let us know what that is so that we can see, is it something? One thing Governor Wolf told us when we first took office 2.5 years ago, if there's a handcuff that we could take off our communities, our counties across the 67 counties of the Commonwealth, and do so without getting in trouble with federal folks or even local. I don't like to break rules or laws. I get in a little bit of trouble when that happens. So, but we're encouraged to do it, to think boldly, to think broadly, to think creatively. I can't sit in Harrisburg and do that alone. I need you to be communicating with us through whatever medium you feel is going to work well for you here in Beaver County, that we can again, this is the third time I'm saying it, continue this communication and this collaboration. The dialogue cannot just be one day that we visited Beaver County. It's every day. We're here. Governor started his remarks by saying he works for you. Well, I technically work for him, but I work for you too. And that's what we're here to do in terms of ensuring that your quality of life is enhanced, and that if you are the victim of exploitation, especially financial exploitation, that you know you have folks you can reach out to, and that we are committed to serving and protecting you.
Yeah, that's a good point. Does anybody have a question on that? Because is that financial fraud? Anybody have a financial fraud or abuse? Where? Oh, yes.
My question ties into that with, I think a lot of seniors come to centers like this or their local office on aging to find information on if they're unsure of something or if they're being taken advantage of. Is there something the government is looking to do to train employees that work at centers like this on a more local basis, as far as like modules that can help their citizens like report a problem, so that the employees here are more aware of what problems are going on within the state?
Okay, I'm going to pass it to Robin.
Sure. One of the best lines, and we're always looking for good things, one of the best lines since 9/11 has been, if you see something, say something. And that's why we are really encouraging people to call 1-800-BANKS, so 1-800-PA-BANKS. So our first activity, our first action is the outreach that we are doing. But I also, and as I mentioned, if you email, in terms of those services and making information available, we will schedule outreach events. They can be avoiding scams and identity theft, or fraud bingo, or scam jams. We will come anywhere in the state to provide those services. And I will make sure this community center, as well as others, know that if you email informed@pa.gov, we will be there. We can set up arrangements to provide those services. So it's a real two-way street. We're reaching out on all of these financial services, and we also want you to reach out to us so we can provide those services.
I'm going to turn it over to Secretary Osborne in a minute, but you know, one of the things I think, I'm not an attorney, but I think one of the things you'd want to avoid is us putting you in a position where you might make in trying to be protective and helpful, you might actually steer someone in a direction that doesn't work out. So one of the virtues of having folks at the state level is that you can say, call them, and that might be the best, and so that you don't have to come down one way or the other and have the liability for having steered someone in the wrong, inadvertently steered someone in a wrong direction. But Secretary Osborne?
Thanks, Governor. As Secretary Weissman pointed out, the work that Banking and Securities is doing for training and education of individuals, you know, Pennsylvanians like each of us are, for volunteers, for staff and senior centers like this. We have over 500 community senior centers across the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. So while Banking and Securities has certain topics to go in and train on, through the Department of Aging and our collaboration with the Attorney General's office, Attorney General Shapiro also has an elder protection unit. It used to be called an elder abuse unit. It's now an elder protection unit, where he has agents that will come to your senior center or any center here. Faith-based entities were mentioned earlier. Anywhere where we can gather and have a training in order to talk about financial exploitation and fraud and senior bullying, which is occurring in some senior centers across, not here I know, but it's occurring in other senior centers across the Commonwealth. We also have a Supreme Court that is pretty engaged in elder abuse. Actually, Supreme Court started several years ago an Elder Justice Task Force, which I'm privileged to serve on. And part of our effort right now is to work with counties and then to work regionally to have elder abuse task forces or interdisciplinary teams, where we're getting the folks in your community who often see financial exploitation, like your banks, like your priests, like your ministers, like your rabbis, like your area agency on aging, like any of you in a grocery store might hear something, see something, be afraid of something, that we can then get regional task forces together that we're talking about these things. I talked to the district attorney a little while ago. Supreme Court Justice Todd just reached out to all the president judges across the Commonwealth, because guardianships are also an area where we're seeing an increase of exploitation in a guardianship and orphans court. So we have opportunities that we have information, and sometimes we think we have the best information in the world, and often we're not really good at sharing it, which is why days like this and opportunities like this for us to connect directly with you. I have several takeaway items listed here already that Linda and I, in particular, Linda can hook me up, your area agency and aging director, with you here in this community who spoke today, that we can make those connections. And we're willing to provide the resources that this community feels its need to be responsive and responsible and to protect one another from all types of abuse. So thank you for that question.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, first of all, thank you for coming to Beaver County. I'm going to piggyback on what Terry said. I'm concerned about the mega agency. in the silos. I understand the change is painful, but I've been in human service and social service for 40 years. And I'm just thinking that someone's going to fall in the cracks. You know, if I can't go to my Office on Aging, right now I work with a grant with the Department of Human Services. They're like two different things. So how will the average person know that this mega 211 center, so to speak, is going to be in place? And again, the piggyback, I mean, each of the counties, 67 counties, have such uniqueness. And I think that's going to go away. That's how we know who we are.
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think, appreciate the skepticism, but the goal is that doesn't happen, that actually we do a better job. And if you look at the services, I mean, there might be some changes at the local level, but the hope is that what we can do is actually be better at what we do at the local levels. So I understand the skepticism. Change is tough, and the history, I think, unfortunately, of government trying to live within its means has not been a very good one. Here we are trying to both live within our means and do a better job, and that is unique. But I believe with the people we have, we're going to be able to do it. And I think if you see anything at the local levels, what you're going to see is an expansion of the services. You're going to see people who actually can answer more questions, and that's what I was trying to say in I guess the second question I got. That we're trying to create a system where people are part of an enterprise that is about people's well-being, whether they're old, or whether they're young, or whether they have intellectual disabilities or physical disabilities, or they just want to get information on something that affects their livelihood and that doesn't necessarily fit into the old silos. I'm hoping that what we end up with is a group of people working together in a way that we haven't worked together before, and that what you should see is better services, not fewer or worse services. So, good question, but that's the goal is to. Okay, I think I have time for one more question. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I work at the AAA for 31 years, and I'm going to try to sneak two in, but my one question is, is there any, thinking about the opiate crisis in seniors, are there any programs across the state or that Aging's working on with banking or with drug and alcohol? Because I'm sure the opiate crisis is affecting our seniors. Some of them might have problems themselves. They might have family members. They might be being exploited by their family members. And are there any unique programs, or are we trying to educate seniors, giving them a chance to talk about things they might not be willing to talk about at senior centers or other things? And then my other question, just real quick, is related to the other things about the unification. I can see that there's a lot of positives that could come from that. I'll share my one fear. I have always worked with auctions and family caregiver and ombudsman, and so I worry about the waiver program and community health choices overclouding our traditional services that are not for people on welfare, for the people that have, in Beaver County, a lot of people have pensions from the steel mills before, and that are our programs that have been the traditional AAAs, how are we going to keep them from being overshadowed or lost in the former welfare system, kind of thing?
Can I take the first question? Let me take your first question. That's nicely done, by the way, sneaking those two questions. I think we all know what you were doing. But let me, the opioids and seniors, I think that's a great reason for why we need to consolidate these different agencies, and that's an illustration of what I'm talking about. Because you're absolutely right. The way the opioid crisis intersects with the lives of our seniors is very different. In some cases, it's because they have chronic pain, and they themselves need the pain relief and pain management that they get from an opioid. So are we sure that we're managing that properly? In some cases, it's because they have a niece or a nephew or grandchild or child who is suffering from substance use disorder. The range of ways that the opioid epidemic affects us, whether through the death of a loved one or because we need to figure out how we take advantage of these things, is a great reason for us to say this is not a senior problem. It's not a Department of Health problem. It's not a Department of Human Services problem. It's not a Department of Drug and Alcohol problem. It's a problem of life. And that we need to make sure state government is looking at this in a way that whenever you call in or interact with that state government through whatever channel, that we're dealing with the problem that you actually have, not the problem that we theoretically think you should have. And I think that's what I'm trying to do here, and I think that's why why I said earlier that the way we have moved on this opioid from the prescription that everyone in this room has was unique at the time. I think there are other states that have joined us, but the physician general gave all of us, including me, a prescription for naloxone if we suffer from an overdose. A first emergency responder has the ability to use that, and most drugstores now voluntarily fill that prescription. And the Good Samaritan law means you can get it for someone in your family if you think you might have a problem with a loved one. That was the Department of Health. The 45 treatment centers we opened up with the bipartisan support of the General Assembly last year, that's actually being administered from the Department of Human Services. So, you know, what you're, you know, talking about with programs through the senior centers like this in terms of how we can deal with this problem, as a Department of Aging, we have all worked together to figure out how to do what we've done so far, which puts Pennsylvania in the forefront. But we have more that we can do. I want all these folks continuing to work together, not in silos to try to figure this out. So I think that's a good example of why this can work. Now I'm going to turn for the second question over to Secretary Osborne.
I'm going to cheat, though, at the risk of the governor kicking me under the table. I'll cheat a little bit. I'm moving. You know, to pick up where the governor left off on the opioid issue, Dr. Levine, as the Physician General, and I have done many events together with regard to not just the importance of naloxone, but also drug take-back boxes. And this opioid crisis starts not in our streets of our communities, it's starting in our medicine cabinets. I come from a family of pharmacists. Growing up, my dad is a pharmacist. We didn't have a medicine cabinet, we had a medicine closet. You know, and for folks in their medicine cabinets, and for seniors in particular, who often are prescribed a lot of prescription medications, we need to better educate our seniors about the proper storage, use, and disposal of those medicines. And if any of you are like my mom at 84, who likes getting her prescriptions filled and then deciding, yeah, I only need to take half of that antibiotic, I'll save it for the next time around. Well, it just doesn't, life doesn't work that way. So it's real important, though, also when you're prescribed opioid medications for a pain that you may have, and they're so easily prescribed anymore, which is why the governor's administration has worked so hard on prescribing guidelines and prescribing guidelines for seniors that our medical director worked with Dr. Levine on. So we need to do more. And if there's something in particular in this community that we can do via that education, via that roundtable discussion, working with your district attorney on those drug take-back boxes, to you guys here in this senior center, I trust if we went around this room, you would say, yeah, I've shared medications. Yeah, that's a problem. So we need to ensure that we are educating our seniors about that proper use, disposal, and storage. To the second part of your question, I also appreciate your 31 years of dedicated service to the local area agency on aging. That's remarkable, so thank you for that. With regard to the second part of your question, one thing that the governor challenged me with, in the best sense of that word, as this unification process and conversation started, was that I have a responsibility, and that responsibility is to ensure that under the Older Americans Act, those non-medical assistance services that we're required to provide in order to get the federal funds that we provide so well here in Beaver County and across the Commonwealth, that that's preserved. And that this unification and the creation of the Pennsylvania Department of Health and Human Services and a Deputy Secretary for Aging and Adult Community Living is going to have the full gamut of seniors who need access to services and supports right here in your community. And not everyone needs a medical assistance program. And as Pastor David mentioned a few questions ago, senior centers are safe harbors. This is where folks can come and feel good and feel safe and feel accepted and feel a part of an engaged community that's looking out for one another. And when we do this right, you don't need those medical assistance programs. That's the goal here, to ensure that we have a health and human service system that's responsive and responsible, so that all Pennsylvanians can age in place with dignity and respect. If we keep ourselves healthier when we're younger, we're going to be healthier when we're older. If we keep folks educated, informed, engaged, and vibrant members of the community, that's what happens right here. And that's so important and will not be lost under this unification, because I and others talk about it every day, because the governor's commitment is to make sure that that happens. I mentioned a little bit earlier, this has to be done right, and it has to be done well. And we can't afford to let anyone fall between the cracks. To the question that was asked a little bit earlier, I'm sure if I asked you right now if Pennsylvanians are falling between the cracks as they try to access services and supports, your answer is going to be yes. This is the way we're going to fix it. We can no longer, that safety net is being attacked every day. That safety net of Medicare, Social Security, medical assistance, plus the lottery funded services that we provide. We can't afford to let that happen. This is how we're going to help fix that.
Okay, I'm being told that you have reached the limit of your patience for answers like this, so I'm gonna cut this off. But I got to say, I really appreciate the turnout. I appreciate your interest in what we're trying to do with your government in Harrisburg, and I appreciate the suggestions and the concerns that you've expressed here. So thank you very much for coming out. Thank you for your good questions. Have a great day.